The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
The subject of death and dying can be a very difficult conversation to have. Many of us avoid having the conversation because it makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to worry or upset our loved ones, and we really don't want to face tough questions or think about our own death. Having open conversations about death and dying allows us to prepare ourselves and our loved ones on how we would like to create our own end-of-life journey. On every episode of Guided Crossings, we will explore a different part of the dying process and offer suggestions on how to prepare your loved ones as well as yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Sebastian, and this is Guided Crossings. Hello and welcome to Guided Crossings. Children can experience grief and loss from a very young age. Like adults, children have their own ways of grieving. It is important to recognize that your child has feelings of grief and to help them express those feelings. Today, I am pleased to welcome Deb Pelletier, a retired grief and bereavement clinician, to discuss grief in children. Deb, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background with grief and bereavement.
I'm a social worker by training and came to work at a healthcare agency that had a hospice component. So worked as a social worker in hospice, which obviously you're up close and personal with grief. And then ultimately that led to a position as bereavement coordinator. So I segued out of the social work during the death and dying phase to helping people after with their grief.
Okay, interesting. How does grief affect a child?
Well, children are impacted obviously very profoundly, particularly if it's someone near and dear to them that they have depended upon and they've lost that person. But you may not evidence it and witness it in the same way you'd see it expressed by an adult. And that will vary on the developmental level of the child too. How capable are they of connecting what they're feeling and putting that into words? So often with children, you look at their behavior. Are they acting out? Are they having problems sleeping? Do they seem sad and teary? Are they withdrawing? You have to look for clues in their behavior because they can't always, or they may not want to, express with words how this loss is affecting them.
Okay, so kids don't really grieve like adults do.
No, they grieve. Yes and no. They feel a lot of those emotions, obviously,
Right.
but they will grieve in spurts quite often. So you'll see a child who will, be really sad and they're talking about, the loved one who's died, and then, can I go out and play? And then you'll see that they're out and they're laughing and they're having fun. They are in and out of the emotion. And they feel it profoundly, but they don't necessarily focus on it 24/7 like an adult would who's thinking about it in that way.
Okay. Did you get to work with a lot of children?
Yeah, I worked, we had a program for children at the agency, and I supervised the woman in charge of that and also spent a lot of time within the program. And we were able to see children as young as 4 up through teens.
Okay, because I was wondering about that. Like, what age do you first recognize grief in a child?
Well,
is like 3 too young, or is it dependent again?
Children will grieve at any age. I mean, even toddlers, infants, they'll be an evidence of them responding to the loss of a significant loved one.
Okay.
And again, it's often through behavior. They might stop eating. They might, just become more sullen. You have to look for how they are acting. But children from infancy on feel loss.
Right. Because I was going to say, like, if we break down grief into age groups and we say a 3-year-old to maybe like a 6-year-old, does their grief look the same? Because a 6-year-old can maybe express grief through a drawing or something, along those lines. So how does that kind of work where, if your 3-year-old or 4-year-old you think is experiencing grief, how do you communicate with that child to help them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, understand that children don't recognize, they can't comprehend and process the permanency of loss at those ages you just mentioned. They are expecting that the person will come back. Or they want to know where they went. They really have not fully integrated the permanency of that person being gone forever physically. So you'll see that kind of revisiting, regrieving, like the confusion of where are they, or that reawakening of they're not here today. And I think with children that young, you help them express through play.
Okay.
Through drawing, you mentioned, through any kind of expression, maybe reading them a story about loss and death and nature, and helping them connect the dots that way, or recognize what they're feeling. They don't have the capacity to put it into clear words consistently.
Right. It's interesting, too, like when you watch TV shows or movies and a young child is impacted by a death of their parent or whatever, they always seem to just bounce so back fast and things like that. And you're just like, is that realistic? Or, like...
Well, they are resilient. Children are resilient.
Right.
And that's, very reassuring for a parent to know. They are resilient, but that doesn't mean they don't feel, and that doesn't mean they don't re-grieve as they go through different developmental stages in their life, that emotion that they're capable of feeling then will come up. But they are resilient, and they are able to adapt. If they lose someone, all is not lost. They're forever traumatized beyond being able to cope. No, they are amazing coping skills.
Do you find that if the child is the one that is passing away, is dying of a terminal illness, that their grief beforehand is they have a different acceptance?
That's an interesting question. I think, again, children are not as defended as adults. So they feel things intensely and profoundly in the moment.
Okay.
And express it in whatever form. And then they move to the next. They don't, they're more honest and open and out there. You know, if you want to say the filter isn't there, but they're not as defended. So they're able to be more real and present and in the moment. So that helps them go through some of these emotions and accept things, I think, much faster.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying when you put it like that, because you always see, like this, such a brave little soul. And the way you're describing it, it's almost like they do come to the understanding of it almost.
Yeah,
in a certain way.
As adults, we have so much life experience, and with children, there's a naivete. They don't really know what they're not grieving because they don't know what they could have had.
Right.
They're not thinking as a mother would be, they'll never graduate. They don't focus on those things. They're in the present.
Right.
They're in the present. I miss not having my pet here today. They don't think in terms of long range as an adult would grieve for that child.
Well, and also the worries maybe too.
They're not there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't
Things
think
are
I've
simpler.
ever really explored it like that. So this is kind of really interesting to me.
It's just simpler.
Yeah. Yeah. What about a child who's like maybe between 8 and say 14 or maybe 12? Because there's a different, 12 to 14 is a huge leap in a lot of
Yeah,
things. Is
yeah.
8 to 12 the same way?
Yeah,
Or
I think what that is, you have to talk to children honestly and use the right terms. Don't say things like they went to sleep or the angels came and took this
Okay.
person. You say it honestly, the body stopped working. They were sick, and so the body was weak and it couldn't keep working, so they've died. You have to be honest and clear, short, not too much information. Don't need a lot of specific details. They need facts, and it has to be at their age level to comprehend it, but not to use euphemisms.
so if the child comes to you with questions, you answer, or do
Yep.
you sort of put them, pull them aside and say, so this happened today? Say like the death of a grandmother suddenly or something, even if like the family's known for a while it's going to happen, how do you deal with that from like say up to 12 years old?
Honesty and telling them directly, because children have radar, they'll sense it, and the most important thing is for them to know they can count on you to be truthful.
So safe.
So if they think you are beating around the bush, you're withholding things, you're not being upfront with them, that trust is shaken. So really just being able to say, again, not a lot of in-depth detail, but just this happened today, I feel sad about it.
So it's good to express what
Sure.
your feelings are.
Exactly. I think adults worry about hiding their tears, hiding how they're doing. I think you don't want to have a child feel like they have to take care of you,
Right.
but to be very open, it makes me sad, or you might see me crying, but I'll be okay. I will be okay. It's just, I loved her so much. Just very open, short, to the point, and not pretending. They want you to be real.
Right, right. So that brings us to teenage years. So I would from 14 to say 18. What kind of strategies? And I was also curious, is grief different for girls versus boys?
Well, two different questions. The teens, first of all.
Okay.
What do we know about teens? They don't want to be different. If they may choose to do things that make them stand out, but they want to be accepted. They don't want to be considered, they want to fit in. They don't want to have attention drawn to them in a negative way. So you want to help normalize what they're going through, help them ease back into school, give them outlets. You don't want to pressure them to talk because they're not going to talk if they don't want to. But again, letting them know, particularly as a parent, I'm here for you. I'm going to keep touching base with you, but you don't push them.
What if it's like the parent that's passed away? How do you prepare beforehand? Is it again, do you have the open conversation? Do you not talk about it? Are there any kind of guidelines that can maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say ease the loss, but...
Well, preparation's important, particularly for teenagers. Again, they don't like being, blindsided. Trust is what they're struggling with, their independence from you. So I think saying, again, this is what's happening, this is what's probably going to happen, or we know is going to happen, and just honest and not belaboring or pushing them to have long conversations about how they feel, because they're not going to want to do that. And if you do know that there is someone they might feel more comfortable talking to, bringing that resource to them.
Okay.
Maybe they're more comfortable talking to an aunt or an uncle. Say, they're always there for you. You can call them, or they're going to call you, so that they don't feel on the spot to have to emote. They're not going to want to do that.
Well, and I think, it's got to be difficult to just go face your friends at school,
Oh, very much.
and so is it a good idea to reach out? I mean, obviously the school's going to know what you've
Yeah.
been dealing with on the home front.
Yeah.
But are there ways, I know in another show we did, you had mentioned, the workplace, someone can reach out
Yep.
beforehand. Are there little things that can be done to ease the child into school again and not make them feel like, odd because their life has really changed a lot?
Well, I would say they need an escape valve. So if there's some way to set up and the teachers to be aware that if something becomes overwhelming, they have a way to step out, not burst out of the room, but go to a space, the guidance counselor's office or what have you, that if they're struggling, they have a way to discreetly go to a safe space and then regroup and come back, would be one way. Or that there's somebody else within that school system that they can touch base with at certain points in the day so that they know they don't have to keep it together 8 hours if they can't. But they don't want to call attention to themselves either.
Right. So self-care, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
What can children do or adults do for children with like a self-care model?
Keeping their routines. That becomes really important because their world has been shattered. They've lost someone, could be a parent or a grandparent they were close to. Keeping everything else as consistent as you can, within means, but and with them having a little bit of choice depending on the age. But if they're into sports, to say, no, it's okay, you can go. We have someone who'll take you. If you want to go, you don't have to, but it might be a good idea. They need those outlets. They need to know that their life in the ways that gives them some sense of security will continue. If they can stay in the home, all those things so that there's not more disruption, more change, more adjustment, whatever you can keep going as it always has is really reassuring.
Right. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Because you're just, I don't know, that person's all of a sudden gone, and teenagers are hard in the first place and going through so much, and then that just sounds really hard.
Teens are challenging, but again, more resilient than we might think, and giving them some choice within boundaries for teens is important. Do you want to take, it's okay, you don't have to go to school today if you're not up to it, but you are going to need to go back to school.
Right.
You are going to need to keep up. So let's look at how we might work this out. Giving them choice where it's reasonable, within boundaries, to help them feel in control, is a good thing with teens, while trying to keep routine for them.
I know in my personal situations, my kids, it seemed like every year they lost a classmate at all different ages. And I don't know, like it was really challenging because my question always was, well, how well did you know this person?
Yep.
Not that it dismisses what you're feeling. The whole school is involved all of a sudden in this, you know? What are some, I was never sure if I handled it properly for them because it kind of threw me too, because you just don't think of that on an everyday basis, that your child could, be in a car accident that afternoon or whatever.
And that's frightening to children because, depending on the age, that person disappeared. And they want to know that they didn't just disappear and everyone, no one's mentioned them because I could disappear. So it's really, I think your question was good, kind of exploring and understanding how significant was the relationship. Are they seeing an empty desk in their classroom? How close were they to this person? And then just, acknowledging, I know you heard this. I know you used to, sit with them at lunch. This is going to be different for you. Just labeling it without pushing them to have to express anything, but just labeling it and letting them know you acknowledge it.
Yeah, I know because they always said that, they'd bring grief counselors in and things like that, but it always just seemed like such a short time. And I've
Yeah.
always, kind of after a few months, kind of going, how are things going with that?
That's good.
Sort of thing, just because I just wanted to make sure that they were aware that I didn't forget.
That's
But it
perfect.
wasn't like an everyday thing,
Yep.
because many times I really did not know these
Yeah.
poor children,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So, yeah. We touched a little bit about it. So, say a parent is given a terminal illness, it has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and there are many kids in the house. I know that everyone's at a different age and a different. What are there guidelines about what's the right thing to do more than, to sort of. You don't want to, if you have a teenager going, well, you're going to have to help out a lot more, or,
yeah.
that sort of thing. Or, and obviously, if, say, it's the mother that's got the father is trying to work, figure out school, all of those schedules. I know we've talked before about making sure you reach out to people and say, hey, I do need help with this, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But any other kind of guidelines?
Well, again, underscoring how important consistency is.
Okay.
Because what are they thinking? How is my life going to change? And they may be thinking about things that aren't even
Gonna
happen.
Okay.
So you can dispel some of that by saying, you will still be going to the same school. We're going to continue to live in this house. Nothing's going to happen today. Anything that you can say to reassure them while also letting them know this is real, this is happening, but so-and-so is going to come and help out. Now this person is going to come and pick you up from sports instead of dad. But you're going to go because they want to know, again, they're very self-focused.
Yeah.
How is my world going to be put in upheaval? So they need consistency and reassurance wherever you can give it, while being truthful too.
Is there a right? Like, is it good to maybe think of counseling prior to as a family unit?
It's really
Or
dependent
that's-
upon that some families are very open in their communication. They're very capable. There's a large network of support that they have. So that might be a family where there's no need for that. If a family's more isolated or they're not really comfortable talking openly, then having a counselor involved who can help mediate that, facilitate that, could be hugely helpful. So you have to kind of look at what's the dynamics of this particular family and what's in place and what's not there. And then a counselor could be helpful. And again, that's where a social worker coming into the home could be helpful. But you'd have to look at that, each family in its own unique way.
Right, right. What about like the funeral? Is it a good idea to, encourage some, like the young kids to go or not go? Or
I
is
don't
it,
know that I'd use the word encourage, but I think I would explore their comfort level and then preparation. So again, this is what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day. And you can be there for this piece, or you can choose not to be. And then what is it going to be like if they choose to go? This is what you're going to see. This is who will likely be there. This is who you're going to be with. And it's not so much encouraging, but reassuring them if you go. Someone's there to look after you. You don't have to sit there endlessly, but preparing them. And accepting if they're really adamant about not wanting to go, that's okay. So what can you do? Do you want to write a note or draw a picture that we're going to, bring there and have, giving them another option rather than pushing it one way or the other. I think we are on the side of feeling like, oh, they can't handle it.
Okay.
But with preparation and with someone to support them, it's often a good idea to have them there for a piece of it.
Okay. Are there some signs that when someone is experiencing grief that they're sort of coming out of it when they're a little young child?
Again, you watch the behavior. Children will re-grieve. They'll grieve in spurts, so it's not going to be as easy. You might say, wow, look how good they're doing in school this semester. Well, that's good, and you want to reinforce that, but you always have to kind of watch the subtleties. Is it Mother's Day? Is it the birthday of the person who died? Is it their birthday? So just be aware, and like you said earlier, revisiting. So how you doing? You know, I'm noticing this looks good, and but you don't seem as sad. But checking in, because you're saying we remember.
Well, and does that happen like from a 3-year-old to an 18-year-old? Or is it more like a 3-year-old to say like 10 that they're sort of, wait a second, as they're growing up, they're recognizing that, you know,
It's gonna
that
go
person's
on.
not, or if they're looking at pictures and they're like, oh, who's this person holding me at 3? And then, you know, the grandmother passed when they were 7, and they're
Yeah.
like, no, these are memories that we can explore about. This is who your grandmother was.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
that's always good to.
Yeah, normalizing, affirming, just not hiding, not making it seem like, oh, this is a taboo subject, because that makes them anxious. Just like why do you, and ask them questions. Oh, what do you want? Why do you ask that? Or I'm wondering,
okay.
you know, because sometimes you think they want to know something, they don't want to know that at all. So you just say,
you're like,
oh,
open a
why
whole
did you
other can
ask
of
me that? What are you
worms.
thinking about? Oh, what made you ask that? Then you get what they need.
Yeah, that's really interesting to actually
yeah.
to think of it like that,
Yeah.
because it's true. You might lead them down a road that they weren't
And they're
going
glazed
there.
over. It's like, what? You know,
Yeah.
no, it's not that at all. So just more questions you can ask for clarity, then you know what they need.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
makes it easier.
What about like resources? I know we're coming from Nashua, New Hampshire area.
Yeah.
So what sort of resources do we have here that can help families or anyone struggling?
We have a lot of supports for adults and particularly parents, and that's a good thing so that they can be resilient and help their children. And the children are often relieved to know that parents getting support through a group. And then insofar as children, there are children's programs. There's one in the Manchester area. You know, again, you can just pull that right up. The resources we have online can direct you to what is, and there are different counselors who specialize working with children or working with grief. So as a family, perhaps, or mother-child, you could go see that counselor for a period.
All right, we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts?
Again, just recognize that children will be able to be resilient, and there's a lot of hope, even when they have a tragic loss, that they can go on and they can heal and they can do well in life.
Great to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your time with us, Deb.
Sure.
Appreciate
Thanks for
it.
having me.
That's all the time we have. Thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.